Uh, hey, freeze all motor functions, what's up? And today I'm gonna do a review of the hit TV show from HBO, Westworld, Season 2. Finally, I can watch this thing. So, Season 1 happened 2 years ago, and the plot is super complicated. But this season, it's gonna get even more complicated. So basically, there's a company ran by a man named Robert Ford. The company is called Delos. They created a few amusement parks full of robots or hosts, and they recreated old periods of time like the Wild West, feudal Japan, ancient India, medieval ages, Roman ages, and they also made the future for some reason. And then we get these human characters going into the park just for fun. We have William, who became a psycho who wants to go against the authority and find the true secrets of the world. We have Dolores, a female host who wants to take over the humans. Maeve, the host who also wants to do that, but she wants to find her quote-to-quote daughter even more. And then we have Bernard, my favorite character, who's also unfortunately a host disguised as a human being built by Ford himself. At least that's what I knew before I watched the season finale. And he wants to access free will and complete consciousness. Alright. By the way, if you haven't watched Season 1, I don't recommend you to watch this video because, it's hard to explain plot on Season 2 without talking about spoilers on Season 1. The last season ended off with an amazing season finale that is both mind-bending and grand, and we also have a crazy cliffhanger. So going into Episode 1, I am definitely excited. Episode 1 is titled Journey into Night, named after the narrative for hosts in Westworld, one of the narratives, and it's a pretty uneventful and slow start, to be honest. The first half of Season 1 is very confusing, and I expect this season's first half to be less confusing but more slow. Still, Maeve wants to find her daughter, Bernard tries to simply survive, Dolores is going around killing people, and William wants to continue to play the game and find a door. He had already found the center of the metaphorical maze of consciousness. Now he needs to find a door? How many things he still has to find? Anyway, the most interesting storyline is probably Maeve's storyline. I really want to know how did she end up in the Shogun world, and how will Lee Sizemore help her. And by the way, minor spoiler alert, Lee had a nude scene, a very brief one. So apparently Jonathan Nolan had been paying attention to Game of Thrones and realized that the people need more male nudity, so here you go. Least interesting storyline is definitely Dolores' storyline. She's still stuck in the Wild West without any purpose, with a bunch of other uninteresting hosts. Bernard's storyline is pretty confusing with the crazy time jumps, but I like the scene where he had to inject himself with some fluid because his robot brain is corrupting. And overall, it feels depressing because of the quiet and grand scenery, plus Ramen Djawadi's lavishing strings, and I still think Anthony Hopkins is returning, but damn, that 2-minute long recap sequence? Why? Episode 2 is Reunion, and to be honest, there's not really a conclusion to this episode. First of all, Bernard and Charlotte isn't on this episode. Arnold is, though, in a flashback, and that's a bit disappointing, since I was really curious what happened to them next. And then Maeve only appeared very briefly. The whole episode is mostly Dolores trying to get into Glory or the Valley Beyond, and meanwhile gathering more hosts to fight back. And then old William continues to play his game. He found Lawrence again, and he also wants to go to the Valley Beyond. Giancarlo Esposito had a very brief cameo, and he wasn't great, but he's still pretty good. There were also a lot of flashbacks on this episode, and finally we get to see the outside world besides of the Delos facility. And the outside world still looks so cinematic, like a painting. It's like Jonathan Nolan is trying to make the outside world as uninteresting as possible. Same as his brother Christopher Nolan, who's known to avoid breaking fourth walls. But still, overall, pretty slow and inconclusive episode. Over to episode 3.
Virtù e Fortuna.
Hopefully I pronounced that right. Yeah. Which means virtue and luck. And this is a pretty damn good episode, not gonna lie. The first half is pretty slow, but things happened and Charlotte and Bernard split, and then Bernard and Dolores crossed paths once again in the second half. At the same time, there's a big war happening at the Fort Forlorn Hope between the hosts and the humans. It was kind of fun, but it feels like it's trying to achieve what Game of Thrones has achieved, but it's never as epic as those battles in Game of Thrones. In fact, Dolores kind of reminds me of Daenerys a lot for some reason. But Dolores is killing everyone while Teddy is secretly sparing lives, and I like that. And I also really love the scene where Lee Sizemore predicts what Hector was gonna say. It's amusing. And I also like the ending where a random samurai popped up out of nowhere because welcome to Shogun World, which is basically park number 2. And the Raj was also featured, which is park 6 out of 6. And it's a bit weird and random at first, but it's interesting to see other parks as well. And hopefully we're able to see Medieval World and Roman World and I don't know, Future World sometime soon. Maybe those worlds are 3, 4, 5. Who knows? Episode 4 is titled Riddle of the Sphinx, and it is easily one of the best episodes of the season so far. Not because it stands out amongst other episodes. It's that it does its thing way better than other episodes. And there's this creeping sense of beauty and sadness folded within small details in this episode that really haunts me. And one of the reasons being that this episode feels more like a video game than any other episode. Bernard is still my favorite character for some reason, and seeing him going out of body, experiencing time jumps, tremble, is just so confusing. It reminds me of the experience Dolores had in the bicameral mind, except this time it's even more trippier and stranger. Bernard somehow found Elsie out of nowhere, then they found a secret entrance to a lab similar to the lab Bernard and Charlotte went on episode 2, which is very eerie because it's like a video game when you accidentally get back from a place you've been, but not for no reason because there are something in there you have to do. It's like a mission and it's like there's a purpose and objective. And we have this James Delos storyline with young William. James Delos died, but William put his consciousness into a James Delos host, so he's still living, sorta, except he keeps on living the same day while being trapped in a simulation room, like the Groundhog Day, but way more depressing. And then it repeated for so many times. When William was the old Ed Harris William, he told James that his daughter died, his wife died, Logan passed away too, which is an unexpected reveal, and James Delos was just trembling and his mind was trying to have free will, but he couldn't, so it was very painful. The most intense and cinematic storyline has to be old William and Lawrence's storyline, when they get back to an old place that Dolores and Teddy had been to in early season 1, and then the Confederados came out of nowhere and captured them, and then things happened. And then a lot of characters cross path, like the girl from the Raj crossed path with Luke Hemsworth very briefly. Bernard and Elsie saw someone else, and the reveal at the end is also pretty crazy. But still, overall, it's such a depressing yet beautiful episode, because it feels like we are putting all these small pieces of puzzles together, yet to realize something bigger. Moving on to episode 5, Akane no Mai, meaning Akane's dance, I suppose, which is an episode where the Maeve people briefly join the Shogun world because they got captured by some friggin' samurais, but they're actually good samurais, and they actually need to fight the bad ones. Candy Newton and the actor for Lee Sizemore had to speak a lot of Japanese for this episode, so I'll give them props for memorizing so much lines in Japanese. But seriously, what bothers me the most is the character of Lee Sizemore constantly narrating over scenes. Oh, yes, that is supposed to happen. That is not supposed to happen. Oh, fuck me, that is definitely not supposed to happen. And then we have Maeve controlling minds and stuff. There's a scene where Maeve talks to a Japanese version of herself, Akane, and the shot was an extreme close-up shot of Candy's face and her saying freedom in Japanese over a bunch of hissing noises. I find that a little cheesy. And the whole Dolores storyline is still the most boring storyline. And seriously, Dolores' likability dropped significantly in Season 2, so much so that I think it's intentional. But the ending scene redeemed this episode. What Dolores did to Teddy is quite evil, and the ending scene of the Maeve storyline is really bloody and brutal and gruesome. It's like a depressing Japanese Quentin Tarantino scene. It's crazy. Next up is episode 6, Phase Space, which feels like a filler episode, but then it's not, so it's kind of uneventful and slow. However, I really love the recap sequence. The recap sequence of the previous 5 episodes were very long and unnecessary, but on this episode it feels more like a movie trailer. It's more fast-paced and it has a very nice soundtrack backing it. It only clocks at 30 seconds, so good job. So, back in Shogun World, the Japanese version of Logan fought with another dude and won. It was a tense fight, but then it wasn't that tense because I barely knew both characters. And then we have Maeve going back into the place and finding her daughter. She did find her daughter, which was shocking. I thought it was just an illusion at first. But yeah, it didn't turn out that well, did it? And on the other side of things, there are a few plot holes that I just don't seem to comprehend that well. Like, how did Teddy suddenly show up, and how did Stubbs escape the Ghost Nation and find his way back to the facility? And Elsie and Bernard went to the cradle on this episode, and in there, Bernard had visions, which is filmed in another aspect ratio. That's pretty cool. And there's also a nice reveal at the end of the episode, but still, overall, probably the weakest episode of the season. Episode 7 is titled Les Écorchés, or is this French? What the heck? Les Écorchés. Whatever. I have no idea how to pronounce this. Anyway, oh my gosh, this episode exceeded my expectations because everything just blew up so quickly. Literally. Almost everyone reached the main facility and shit went down. The teaser before the title sequence is a little confusing though. It took me a few seconds to realize that it takes place in the future with Charlotte Hale and not in the present with Elsie. But wow, a lot of characters cross paths on this episode. For most of the episode, Bernard was still in his visions and the cradle, but it's actually interesting and quite awesome to see the return of a character. And then there were a lot of chaos and fights in the facility, and it comprises of all sorts of different small fights between two characters, and it's exciting and entertaining. By the way, that Tallulah Riley's last scene, badass. And the scene where Maeve, Lawrence, and William crossed paths are totally insane. Very tense because I kind of root for all 3 of the characters. And the ending scenes are super glitchy. The ending scenes are super glitchy and confusing in a good way. I actually sympathize with Bernard a lot on this episode, and I kind of feel bad for him. But yeah, this is a hell of an exciting episode. Next up, we have Kiksuya, which is an oddball in the season because it's a very special episode. And the reason being is that this episode is completely centered around a character we've never seen before, and that's it. There are a few abrupt shots of Maeve laying on a bed, but that's it. It feels a bit out of place. But this entire episode is a story about Akechida. Why are there so many weird names in episode titles? Anyway, Akechida, which is one of the natives of Westworld, and he told this story to Maeve's daughter in Native American language. So before Akechida and Koha were lovers and they lived together, he died, and in the next life he became one of those native savages who tries to conquer the world. And then he stumbled upon Logan, who looked exactly like where he left off, naked in the desert, going insane, saying that this world is wrong and that there was a door. And that touched Akichira, and he remembered about Koha. So he and Koha tried to go through the door, which Akichira had seen before, but now the door was gone. But they kept on searching until the Westworld people took Koha away. And then Akichira returned to the village. Koha was already an exactly different person. A completely different person. So Akichira purposefully died and found the real Koha in the Delos facility. And by that time, Koha was already decommissioned. So Akichira wanted to keep on telling people about the maze and the door, and it's really touching. And even though we know what's going on in the full picture, when we look at the story through Akichira's eyes, it's very beautiful and depressing, and that's what made this episode so golden. And then it's episode 9, Vanishing Point, which is way more eventful and solid. It's more centered on William, or Man in Black, while still having some critical scenes for Bernard and Maeve. First of all, I don't think I've ever heard Bernard swear, and for some reason I'm glad that he did. If other characters swear, it's normal, but not for someone as underdog and as helpless as Bernard, who just yelled, "Get out of my fucking mind!" And great acting from Jeffrey Wright, by the way. And then we have William's storyline, which connects to his wife's suicide a lot. I have to throw a spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
So there are these flashbacks of William narrating and reminiscing his wife's suicide, the night it happened, what happened before it, what caused it. And it was sad, yet so haunting and morbid, especially in William's POV. And then we get the scene where William denied reality and thought everyone were Ford in disguise, including his daughter, Emily. So he shot Emily to death. Of course I feel bad for Emily, but I don't particularly like this scene because it seems like such a meaningless death for Emily. It's such a dumb death as well. Emily went all the way from escaping a tiger from the Raj to simply getting shot for no good reason. And the ending is also quite interesting. Teddy killed himself in front of Dolores, which is also heartbreaking. The moment Teddy said, "I'll protect you until the day I die," I already knew what's going to happen next. No way Dolores dies because, that'll be anticlimactic, so of course Teddy dies. The finale is episode 10, which is 1.5 hours long of total mindfuck that I couldn't comprehend at all, and one of the reasons being is that I realized that the whole time I was a human watching all these events through a frickin' computer screen. And what I saw in this episode are things that run way deeper than life and death, than fake or real, than consciousness and free will, than timelines and worlds and dimensions, than alternative realities and purpose and meaning and divine deities and existence. It's the most incomprehensible episode I've ever watched in my entire life. I seriously have zero clue how to talk about this episode without giving a spoiler alert. So, yeah, without us giving a spoiler alert or with a spoiler alert, because I can't explain it either way completely. But all I can say is this is really well written and well thought out. Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy probably popped their brains and drew 10,000 mind maps and timelines and relationship maps and plot outlines to get this far, to write something this complicated. So, spoiler alert, here we go.
Spoiler alert.
If you aren't caught up with the previous 19 episodes, it all leads up to Dolores leading a ride of hosts, trying to reach the valley beyond, but somehow everyone but Dolores died on the way, including Teddy because he killed himself, although he was kind of revived, but was he though? And then William, after killing his daughter for thinking that she was a host controlled by the consciousness of a dead person, Ford, he was gonna kill himself, but he didn't. Instead, he ran into Dolores, More like Dolores ran into him. And they both also wanted to go to the Valley Beyond to understand humanity, consciousness, and purpose, I think. And then Bernard showed up in front of some weird door where Dolores and William found him. And then Dolores revealed that she built Arnold. No, she built Bernard. And it wasn't Ford who built him. Okay, so after Arnold died, Arnold told Dolores to kill him, so Arnold died. So Ford built the Arnold host. Arnold host somehow died, I think, and then Dolores created Bernard. So Arnold 3.0, I guess. And then there's this power thing. It felt like Dolores was in control of everything, but then sometimes it felt like Bernard had the upper hand. Anyway, Maeve escaped the lab with a poetically brutal scene where hosts' bulls kill security guards of Delos. And then they try to go to the Valley Beyond before Clementine 3 or 4.0 catches them up. 3.0, I'm pretty sure. Clementine 1 is plain Clementine. Clementine 2 works for Dolores, but sometimes she was controlled by Ford's consciousness. And then Clementine 3 was completely controlled by Delos people or Hale, to act as a tool to make hosts kill each other. And then there's the scene where Lee Sizemore died, which is devastating. He had a speech before he died, and he didn't even have to die. He could have just turned himself in. I love his character, damn it. And then anyway, the weird door leads to the forge. Dolores and Bernard entered it, and then they entered someone's consciousness inside the forge, and it's played by Logan, but it's not really Logan, probably because Ben Barnes needed more screen time. Anyway, they teleported somewhere, everywhere, through memories of the now-dead James Delos, which had a different aspect ratio, again, and they realized that all the guests' data were recorded, and then later on, Dolores opened the door to let Écorchés and others in to the virtual Eden, but after that, Bernard said, "It's a fucking nightmare," and pointed a gun at Dolores. He didn't want to kill her, but Dolores kind of grabbed the gun and pulled the trigger, but yeah, so she's kind of dead, but she wasn't actually dead, but it was a shocking scene nonetheless. And by the way, before this scene, it's apparently there's a reveal that humans are actually just predictable codes. There's a crazy shocking scene where whoever writes this episode, Jonathan Nolan, probably kind of disses humanity. Jonathan Nolan disses humanity by saying that humans, they're actually codes, and if you figure out that code, yeah, humans are actually rather simple. So that's already quite a mindfuck. Anyway, Clementine came to the valley, Maeve's crew came to the valley, and there's this epic scene where people around Clementine started to kill each other, and Maeve met her daughter again before he tried to stop the fights. She tried to stop the fights until she got shot again, and then Écorchés made it through, so did Maeve's daughter, and then we see Bernard in the forge again, but in the second timeline where Dolores was found dead, quote-unquote dead, when Carl Strand wanted to search for Peter Abernathy's codes, he failed, and then Bernard remembered everything all of a sudden, and remembered that he recreated a host of Hale with Dolores' consciousness and have the real Charlotte Hale killed. What in the fuck? And killed Carl Strand and others. What? And he also remembered Elsie's death, which was also very devastating and uncalled for. Why does she have to die? Why does everyone have to die? She's not even a host. She can't be revived. Or will she be revived? I don't know. And then Dolores and Charlotte's skin killed Bernard. But then not really. We get back to Bernard after he escaped the forge, after he killed Dolores, and we see him realizing that when Ford came back to him, it was all in his head actually, which means he had reached the bicameral mind and maybe he's a schizophrenic? Anyway, I think he erased his memories and slept on the beach before he entered Timeline 2, where Dolores and Charlotte's skin is revealed. Oh yeah, before that, it's just a little bit anticlimactic when Bernard was like, "Get out of my fucking mind," and deleted Ford. He actually successfully deleted Ford. Okay, anyway, Later on, Bernard woke up in this lab in timeline number 3, which takes place in the future, where instead of Bernard asking Dolores questions, it's the other way around. And apparently it's a new world, so Dolores and Charlotte's skin is Dolores again, and then we have a separate Charlotte host. I wonder where the hell it is. Plus, Radiohead's Codex is such a perfect soundtrack to this insane mindfuck. Tom York's soothing vocals, the very calm after the storm pianos, this odd sense of peace and normality backed with this strange and unexplainable and directionless concept of meaningless lives, all very, very beautiful. And then we have the post-credits scene that takes place in the very, very, very distant future, where William enters the Forge as if it happened right after his hand blew up before Dolores and Bernard entered it in Timeline 1. The Forge was ruined, I don't know. The Forge was ruined, and he saw Emily, but apparently they were both hosts, because they were both dead by that time, and they were in another fidelity test like the one William did to James Delos. So, there you go. If you understand the 4 minutes of things that I've just said, props to you. Overall, Westworld's second season is a truly controversial and mind-bending season, and it's leagues more ambitious and complex than the first season. And as a result, a lot of back and forth took place, a lot of explaining took place, and a lot of entertainment is sacrificed, which is almost exactly opposite of what Game of Thrones Season 7 did, which is less complication, more entertainment. Acting performance-wise, Jeffrey Wright, Tandy Newton, the person who plays Akishira, and of course Anthony Hopkins are excellent. And even though Bernard Lowe is my favorite, the character of Lee Sizemore quickly became my number 2 favorite because he's just too relatable. Makeup is okay, visual effects are stunning, cinematography is breathtaking and beautiful, but costume design is meh. Literally, every character has one set of costumes throughout the whole season, and that's it. Bernard had been wearing that friggin' black suit the whole time. Same for Maeve, same for Ford, same for William. And another flaw would be that the show feels so less and so much at the same time. So less progress have been made, but it feels like everything happened all at once, simply because of all these overlapping timelines. And the pacing is kind of slow. But that being said, I do love how mentally challenging and puzzling the show is. I like how symbolic and metaphorical and deep and impactful the show is. This show and this season feels beyond time and space and existence and purpose. It's truly transcending and eye-opening. I also love how poetic the dialogues are, especially the last line Anthony Hopkins said on the season. And I also appreciate how the show feels like playing a video game because of all the back and forth. And it pauses, and narration, and changes of POVs. It feels like every character has an objective to complete, and they react in certain ways. Yeah, and I can see that Jonah and Lisa pulled inspirations all the way from poems to video games. The worst is episode 6, Phase Space, and the best is the finale, The Passenger. I'm giving Westworld Season 2 a strong 7 to a light 8 out of 10. So, have you watched Westworld Season 2? From 1 to 10, how much is rated? Like if you like it. Hate if you hate it. And subscribe if you want more.